So that leads us there often. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Did anyone find that really helpful? Because I really did. I really feel that just being honest. Go ahead. I'm glad we got some hands up because it's so. What he said in the beginning, especially about finding your why, it kind of goes back to the corporate giving. It's like if you're looking for money, you have to be very clear on your message. Like, what is your why for doing it? Not just because we want to give back because there's a trending hashtag campaign. No, it's like fits our mission of giving back. And so I think what Carrie's saying makes a lot of sense there. So this last question, and then we're going to try to get some audience questions after. This is really to look into the minds of our esteemed panelists here on what is the future of corporate giving? And that is the question that we've asked our three panelists to share.
Well, okay, I'm going to continue my story. What is the future of corporate giving? It's more like has occurred since I got that call from Wing Lam. And I'm going to lay it out like this. When the pandemic, in April of 2020, everything shifted. Meals of Love were shut down. Ronald McDonald House, and the builds at Habitat. So Wayne calls and he goes, hey, I got all this food, it's rotting. What are we going to do with it? We can take it to doctors or hospitals. We can take it to police and fire. And so I said, yes, as I was pinching myself, because it was hard to say yes at the start of the pandemic. But this is what happened. We showed up at hospitals. In fact, we showed up at the same hospital where my children were born by the chalk nurses and doctors, but I was so caught up in the pandemic at the time, not wanting to go out of the home because I was supposed to be sheltered, that I didn't even appreciate who was there until we had all this food. We had Yogurtland yogurt, we had Monster energy drinks, we had Wahoo's fish tacos. And we looked at the doctors and nurses coming down the hall that we were bringing it to, and I realized, oh my gosh, these are the same doctors and nurses that treated my twins when they were born premature. And I was able to say thank you in the moment. We were able to go to other hospitals and be able, when every doctor and nurse I knew had scars or at least bruising on their cheeks, and we were able to give them ice rollers so they could roll on their faces. And we were able to hear doctors and nurses in the moment giggle as they got their ice rollers. We showed up at police stations when police were under a lot of fire 18 months ago, and we were able to show them appreciation. And one police chief in particular, Costa Mesa's police chief, got emotional and he said this is the first act of kindness they've received in months. We showed up at fire stations. I got to literally thank the firemen that protected my home in Irvine during the Santiago fires. And what I learned when I said yes to Wing Lam was, as I always have, and I always pinch myself when he says something because I don't understand it, is philanthropy today is flexible. It has to be flexible, just like work. You know, we have to learn to not know in the future. We have to learn to fail fast in the future. So we have to learn to say maybe to things that we didn't understand before. When people are not worried about people getting houses and Habitat for Humanity, suddenly worried about getting blood, we start holding blood drives. And we start doing California Love Drops, bringing Wing Lam and Wahoo's Fish Tacos to our blood drives. Now we've had 70 blood drives since April of 2020 at a roofing company. We've raised over 4,000 life-saving units of blood, and each one of those donors gets a thank you in a big way from the California Love Drop. That's the future of philanthropy. It's creating super flexibility with ears wide open as the world shifts. And what that means is, I don't know what philanthropy is going to look like next month. It's going to keep changing because what people fear in the world is changing. I'm going to say one last thing because I'm too excited and I'll keep going. But the last thing is, it's this authenticity. People crave authenticity. There's more inauthenticity, at least perceived in the world, than we've ever seen. What people say about themselves, what they say about people, people crave authenticity. And if you have real stories like I'm telling you about your people coming together, you will be heard and you will be relevant inside and outside your company. And since the California Love Drop, since our giving became more flex, our brand is stronger, our culture is stronger, and I sleep better at night. Thank you.
And from the nonprofit perspective, and both of my colleagues here brought up good points about being flexible and understanding the why as you think about investing. And even as startups out here in the audience, if you're thinking about who's the right organization to work with. And on the nonprofit side, Pamela Waite's in the back there, she's on our board as well. And we talk about, how are we defining our why since COVID has changed this industry so much, and how we think about who we help. So as I encourage everyone here to be thinking about a nonprofit that resonates with your business model, you know, as a grassroots organization, we can have that flexibility of, you know, this is our path, but we're willing to kind of take a look at still focusing on that path, but branching out, if that makes sense. So I think there's flexibility on both sides.
So I think I'll build on that too. There's a thought. I've written a lot of angel checks. I've written a lot of checks where I've been the first investor into a company, and there's a thought that that's not too far away from philanthropy, right? It's kind of this idea of for-profit philanthropy. The place that I've tried to occupy in the world, I'm a huge believer that we have to take care of each other, and there is enough, as Ash said. I'm an economic enabler. I look at it as a multiplication, and if we can fund a company that can solve a problem in a new, more effective way, that can enable a lot. That can enable a lot of jobs. That can enable a lot of future opportunity, whether that's people learning new skills, and that's the place that I occupy. And so I love Charles' comment about being flexible. I think that's what we really need from people, and people with means, and corporate flexibility. We do not have nearly the level of participation in this area from corporate investment into new companies. There's not nearly as much R&D spend. Those are investing in the future. The pace of change is going at such a rapid rate, and yet we have a lot of hoarded wealth and complacency. And I think that's the place that we try to lead from here, is to say somebody has to go first. And that may lead to some failure, but you have to play the long game. And if a founder learns some things, even through their early failures, that hopefully will get them to pick themselves up and do it again. And I've done 9 startups. I'm involved currently in probably about 50. And that's the place where I live, and that is where I try to have my impact. And I think we need people to be more open-minded and more flexible in how they think about the impact that they can have with their investment. It's not always just pure return. And I think that is the real opportunity of where this and corporate giving, corporate investment, corporate philanthropy, any of these are way more intertwined than most people like to think about, in my perspective.
Okay, thank you. Before we do the audience question, I just had this geek moment. I came up with a term. Maybe someone has this. So ROI means return on investment, right? What if we said ROI, return on impact?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. So anyone wants to take that, make a startup?
I took it.
All right, take it. It's the art of giving, as this panel would have. Anyone have questions? Please raise your hand. Okay. If you have questions, I'm gonna be right here with the mic. Oh, sir. Okay, thank you. This gentleman first, and who's the other person who raised their hand? Could you give the mic to him when you're done? The gentleman with the hat.
I will.
Thank you.
What was my question? Oh yeah, Karen. So I really like the thing you said about the team, right? Like as a founder, like you always have to have this team slide, but you kind of like were pointing out the culture is becoming more of the same of in a startup, right? So like how important is it really, especially like going forward with like everyone is working remotely, right? The founders haven't even met each other like in this remote environment. So how important is like investors looking more to like the company culture to attract talent? And how do I put that into my slide deck? I guess is the question.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think the key things that people are looking for are, can you attract talent? And a lot of times people will try to show that through, okay, these are the advisors I have around my business, or these are the people that have said they will join if I'm able to raise funding. And so there are a number of different ways to solve that. I think it's sort of one of those where like past performance, past behavior in other companies is probably a good indicator of that. And so you just have to find your way to do that. If you show me, at least from my perspective, if you show me a group of people that have never worked together that are trying to do something, I'm going to need to understand what you're doing to mitigate what look like really significant risks. What are bonding you together so that when it gets hard, because it will get hard, what is bonding you together so that that won't fray and people won't walk away? And that I've had startups, I mean, because it's so adventurous. I had a startup that broke apart over the last 6 months. And what they did is they actually gave us our money back as a way to make good and said, look, we're going to be doing this for a long time. This one didn't work. We're giving you your money back and we want you to support us in the future. And I said, absolutely. And they had a really strong, but during a period, they literally lived together under the same roof and moved from different parts of the country to come together to work on it. So there are ways to mitigate. That got us comfortable enough that they were going to give it a go. And so I don't have the answer. I think you have to find your answer, but it's a real issue. If I see a team that's worked together before and they're totally distributed and they can articulate how they have that deep trust, that deep through line that's connecting them together, I can easily get to that. But if it's, we met online, we don't really know each other, and we're going for it, there's going to be a lot more digging to be done. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. What would you say is the role of social enterprise in corporate giving and that talking about return on impact? I'm trying to work with a company. I do startup development too, but their whole model is lowering the barriers to entry to the business so that people who are really in a position of need can enter the business and thus improve their situation. Do you think social enterprise is a pattern that will increase in the future? What do you think the role is going to be?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Charles probably has some thoughts as well. I look at it as you have to find, that was kind of my point with this view of early capital investment. If you can help people understand the impact of their investment, it really, to me, it's about a capital matching situation. You're going to have trouble going to a venture capital fund whose sole ambition is maximum multiple if they don't believe a social enterprise is going to produce that. So it's just you're just fishing in the wrong pond potentially. But there are more dollars associated with impact investing or ESG investing than there have ever been. And it's a huge growing trend. And so as we get better at clarifying the ROI and what this company is designed to do, I think we'll get better at matching the right pools of capital to the right opportunities. That's my hope.
Carrie, you're going to need the mic to tie this back in because I'm reaching on a story that I haven't told yet. But I recently witnessed something that in a short period of time allowed me to see what happened with Wing Lamb, the culture of Wahoo's, Antis Roofing, their culture and their brands. And it happened so fast that what just happened? Why is everybody noticing? Why do they see it differently? And I watched this last week on a flight to Tampa for business with my family. I was here, my wife here, my two twins were there. They're 7 years old. Suddenly something happened that was really dramatic, and some of you may have had this before. We heard a loud scream immediately behind my son, and then we heard the pilot over the intercom. "Excuse me, there's a medical emergency. Is there a medical professional on board?" There was a freeze. We all looked up. We started to stand. What could we do? A guy behind me started to stand. Suddenly a woman really slowly entered from the back. As she was entering, I was looking at the passengers and I was looking at myself. I was pissed. I was upset, pardon my language, because I was going to be late to a conference that was really important that I was speaking at. The guy in front of my kids, he was upset. He was looking at his watch like he was going to miss a flight. The whole plane was upset. This was the whole community. This was the whole community. This woman walked forward and she whispered something to the flight attendant's ear, which I found out later. She said, "I'm a pediatric nurse." She came like a blood donor, noble, quiet. She came up there and she started administering. She asked for oxygen. They had 2 oxygen bottles. She asked for ice. She asked for towels. And every passenger that I saw took his dinner towel. We started throwing it to this guy. And this guy was bad off. And I won't tell you what happened, but he did survive. I'll tell you this. I watched the whole economy, the whole community shift. Because what happened was the person that was most able, which was closest to a doctor, stood, and the second person stood up, the guy behind me who started to sit up in the first. This guy had a stethoscope around his neck. I thought he was a doctor. Why didn't he stand up first? And he goes, no, I'm a dive medic for the Pacific Aquarium. I am expert in understanding pressure, what it does to people. And he was able to predict what was going to happen every time we lost elevation as we turned the plane around to land in Albuquerque. But the reason I tell you this story is because it was known there was a person who had a skill, a doctor on an airplane or a nurse on an airplane. There was a second who had the next skill. There was a third medical professional. The flight attendants fell in line. The whole economy shifted. The whole community shifted to what was important in the moment. And when that flight finally landed in Tampa at 11 o'clock at night and we hadn't eaten for 12 hours, we gave them a standing ovation. They got our attention because they lived in that moment. That doctor, that nurse, I hope that I get in contact with her someday, because my bet is her life is forever changed. The patient survived. I would have heard about it because we inquired. But what we experienced, we'll never forget. And that's the story that has to be told if you have success in philanthropy. You have to get their attention. And when you have real causes with vulnerability, with authentic stories that you're not carefully crafting, you're telling them, you hold it like this. I'm going to tell the story of what we're doing, because if I don't tell it, then how's the world going to know? How's it going to be repeated? How are they going to be able to do it in Florida and give me advice back on how we can do it better? But when you hold it like that, then it grows. The movement grows. And as long as your brand aligns with what you're doing, I think you'll find that you'll be heard inside and outside your company.
Ollie, do you have any feedback? That's a really good question. Okay, no problem. I think we have time for one more question. Oh, go ahead, man.
Thanks. I thought you were just talking a lot, and then I heard you say vulnerability, and my girlfriend's been watching a lot of Brene Brown, that you say. So I've had to learn about vulnerability myself. I'm poor. I actually had someone pay my way to come from Tacoma, Washington to come to this event because I've been in a startup that we started for 2 years. What it really comes down to for people like me is access to opportunity. Because I'm poor, I couldn't get a traditional bank loan because they're just not lending to anybody that doesn't have I was told I can't even apply for an ABA loan or SBA loan without a 750. When I did go in, they needed to bring a guarantor and said that you're so poor, we have to take you off any loan we give you because you pull a score down. So I just went in again after a year and said, hey, I just need my second, we have a patent that I just paid off in $200 chunks every month, like a court fine, to be able to own that patent. We're in the process of getting it made, and it's all VR stuff. I invented Clean VR before the pandemic, but didn't have the money to be able to do any of that, so I sold everything I had, all for a lawyer to be able to patent the stuff, and now we're working on other solutions. We also have a game coming out. But there's an entire structure. I was told if you don't have money, get a good business plan, the money will come. So I wrote a 100-page business plan, which is absolutely psycho, and I understand that people would want to read it, but any question you had was in there. And you're like, oh, nobody wants to read those anymore. Make a pitch deck. Great. Spend money on somebody helping make a pitch deck, which is now updated and changed. And the problem is people like me don't have access to opportunities to people that can fund. What we get is we get advice saying, you need to get to the assistant. That's who it is. And then you go, great, how do I get a hold of the assistant? They go, I don't know. So you get stuck in this loop where you can't go to traditional lending and funding because either A, you're asking a 70-year-old dude to invest in VR, and he's like, I don't even know how to use the internet. So trying to get people to relate to that, even if you're on the cusp or you're inventing stuff that people haven't even thought of. But we got into this because we didn't want people that are making a lot of the decisions that they are to make the decisions for us. You know, they represent a metaverse, we represent a subverse. And that's what we're trying to build. But I have to do things where I can't be the only person, but through the generosity of others, from other people giving, corporate giving, I was able to fly here, sit in this front row, and then say, I understand what you're saying about vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to add a comment that as you're starting up and as a nonprofit, we're raising funds, you always feel like you're on the cusp, on the cusp of something huge. And it is a scavenger hunt of finding, the right folks. But events like this and meeting new folks, that there's always a connection. It is a very small world, but it does pay off. Thank you, members.
I also just want to give a round of applause for just sharing. I mean, we've never met you yet, and just for you being honest about your journey. And dude, keep the journey going. And this is the right event to meet like-minded partners. There's investors here. Obviously, Carrie's here, and other investors here. And dude, let's talk after. I'll see if I can introduce you to some specific people, man. I really want to support your journey.
Lots of sunscreen, that's all I have.
Just one thing too is I didn't really land on one of the main points is people want to hear you, but our brains think that people hear data. You tell them data points. This is going to change the world, but they can only land and stay with it if you tell it through story. That's why I told everything through story, so you'll remember it. And it's weird. I can't explain the science of it. Carrie probably could better. I don't know why you're always the brainiac in the group, or Ash could, or we just met today, but I think that if you all, inside and outside your company, tell everything only through an incident that occurred in your life, that's the only way they can compare and go, aha, oh, they had that pain, oh, then they see it differently. And that you give people a story, you give them a gift. We'll always remember you telling that story. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Well, I know there's a full packed day for Eureka Fest. Before we go, though, quick social media reminder. If you're taking media, make sure to do the hashtag Eureka Fest. And on Instagram, it's Eureka Hub. So make sure to do that if you take any media. Check out all the amazing tables out there. Again, if anyone is looking for some media coverage, I do have a podcast. We're doing tapings today, so feel free to stop by there. But yeah, I just want to thank you all for attending. Thank you so much. And please interact with each other. And please say something to Adam. Connect with him since he's coming from out of state. So cool to show him some California love. So thank you everyone for coming.
Let's keep them here in California, in Orange County.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys stay there. We're going to take a selfie with Carrie's camera.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
You can wave. Really enthusiastic. All right, here we go. All right, get the audience.
Thank you, everyone.
I